Hi, this is A New Nigeria with Wale Oluwade. This is your current affairs program where we critically examine the strategic issues bedeviling Nigeria's developmental aspirations and boldly offer practical suggestions on building the Nigeria of our collective desires. Today's episode promises to be engaging and exciting. As you can see, it's different because it's a continuation of the last episode we did, which was part one of what we're continuing today in the part two. Now, the topic still remains the strategic imperatives for a national economic and human development master plan. Number one, no nation can compete and remain relevant in the medium to long term without a highly educated, skilled, and empowered citizenry. B, because Nigeria currently loses about 3 billion annually to education tourism to countries such as Sudan, Benin, Ghana, Cyprus, Malaysia, Ukraine, etc. C, because without education, our children are easy targets for terrorists, bandits, cyber crimes, and sundry criminal cartels. And you can see that the evidence abounds all over our country. Number two question, why is vocational education system a strategic imperative for our national economic and youth development program? The answers, our youth need active engagement in positive activities to divert and channel their energies from nefarious activities into productive economic uses with massive impacts on the economy. B, our youth also need marketable skills to build enterprises through MSMEs and thereby reduce our very high unemployment, and underemployment rates by depending less on government jobs. The reality starkly is that, government cannot employ everybody. We're graduating, in inverted commas, far more, students from our universities and polytechnics, than the government can absorb into its employment. And there are no private sector jobs anymore, So we need to create, private sector jobs to recruit people. Now, see, because China lifted 850 million people out of poverty in 40 years, representing 75% of world's total poverty rate. China has done it. There is nothing I'm saying here that has not been done elsewhere. China is a model, that has done it successfully. The juggernaut that China has become economically is because of some of the things I'm proposing here. Also, because China has the largest vocational educational school system in the world. It has 11,300 schools, enrolling a total of 32 million students with 10 million graduates per annum. China has 140 million micro, small, medium enterprises, which in 2020 contributed over 60% of total GDP of China, 50% of tax incomes, 79% of jobs created, and 68% of total China or Chinese exports. That is why MSMEs incubation is critical. That is why vocational educational school system is critical. Also, in China also, there are about 1,400 technical universities and technical schools in addition to regular universities. The third question, what is the nexus between MSMEs incubation and GDP growth? China's economic renaissance was principally attained through the aggressive incubation and proliferation of MSMEs in critical economic sectors, servicing the need of the entire world. It met its own need, the need of its people, just like I advised that from 2023 or 2024 to 2033, 10 years, we should attain self-sufficiency in food, in education, in healthcare, in housing, in security, in transportation. Thereafter, then we can begin, to address the next economic frontier will be export-driven economy. That's what China did. With proper implementation of the foregoing SMART goals, Nigeria can attain a 1 trillion GDP in 10 years. This is a projected GDP growth for the next 10 years. Like I said earlier on, if we grow at minimum 10%, which is double digits for the next 10 years, and we just grow incrementally every year from 2024, Nigeria by 2033 would have attained 1 trillion GDP growth rate. This is what you can see in this image. It is possible and it is doable if we have focused leadership. What are the key performance indicators? One of the tragedy or bane of our governance model in Nigeria is that we have either president or governors, and their key appointees, ministers, commissioners at the states, as the case may be, who come into office and have no targets, no deliverables. Nobody's asking them questions. It was notorious under President Muhammadu Buhari, where he kept ministers who were flagrantly incompetent, obviously, manifestly, incompetent, and it kept them in office for 8 solid years, doing nothing. So you saw a couple of them come out at the end of their 8-year tenure to say, I didn't know anything about Ministry of Education. And he was not fired, he didn't resign. So if you're going to have the smart goals being achieved, growing our GDP to 1 trillion in the next 10 years, if you're going to move all these people out of poverty and grow our economy, and attain self-sufficiency in the areas I highlighted, you cannot afford to have ministers who have no targets, who have nobody, asking them questions, So these are key performance indicators. Number one, a monthly, quarterly, and annual GDP growth rates it's a must. Monthly general and youth unemployment rates reports is a must. Monthly tax revenue collection reports is a must. Monthly jobs across sector reports, jobs created across sectors, it's a must. Monthly export revenue reports is a must. Monthly infant and maternal mortality reports is a necessity. Monthly school enrollment reports from the local government to the states to the federal, it's a must. Monthly vocational educational system created across local government and wards, the reports it's a must. Monthly MSMEs reports is a necessity. Monthly net migration reports. How many Nigerians are living? Because what happens that if you begin to get these plans right, the number of Nigerians leaving the country, as it is currently in astronomical terms, will be reducing gradually, because suddenly they begin to see, even though I also know that it's not going to happen overnight, that's why I said it's for the first 10 years, suddenly people begin to see that government, cares about them, government is thinking about them. So the tendency to want to leave begins to drop. So monthly net migration reports, it's a must. Monthly education and health tourism reports, it's a must. Monthly NHIS enrollment reports is a necessity. Monthly inflation rates reports, it's a must. Monthly FX rates reports, we need to monitor, how our Naira is doing against the major currencies of the world. Monthly crime rates, because if we're doing things right, the crime rates will reduce. Monthly birth and death rates, because if we're saying we need to reduce population growth, we need to make sure that people are not having 5 children and every time saying, giving Thanksgiving in churches and all of that. Monthly foreign direct investment reports is also a must. Monthly power generation and distribution reports is also a must. How do you fund all of this that I highlighted? How do you fund it? Or what is the budget? So the key sectors, I've divided them into 5: food security, education, healthcare, vocational and technical skills acquisition, MSMEs incubation. So all of this, I am thinking 20 billion should be able to address this. $20 billion, not Naira, $20 billion divided equally amongst these 5 major heads should be able to address this. And the money is available. Don't even think there is no money. The money is available. If we cut all the wastages, if we cut out all the corruptions, all the leakages in the system, Nigeria has got far much more money to do this. What are the operational guidelines in a minute? There shall be a responsible agency. The agency shall be the Federal Ministry of Jobs Creation and Poverty Eradication. There shall be no new ministry or agency created, but the current Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management shall be renamed and rebranded appropriately. So the current Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management shall be collapsed and renamed and rebranded the Federal Ministry of Jobs Creation and Poverty Eradication. Number 2, the Chief Responsibility Officer for this program shall be the President, assisted by the Vice President. There shall be a Federal Minister heading the ministry, who shall be the responsibility officer supervising the entire bureaucratic architecture at the ministerial level federally. Now, coordination and harmonization. In addition, there shall be a special advisor to the President on jobs creation and poverty eradication, whose remit shall be, among others, to have direct interface with the President, the 36 states governors and the FCT, and all the local government areas, in addition to the various interacting agencies and all of that. And the job of these special advisors is to supervise and monitor the key performance indicators that I highlighted. That is his job, to every day, as it were, give the President reports, of achievements or failure in the key KPIs that are earlier on highlighted. Now, if you listen to President Biden, every month there's a jobs report in the US. In the UK, there's a jobs report. So you need to have people in office at the state, at the federal, at local governments who are on top of issues. You can't just govern and sleepwalk through 4 years. This is a brief organogram. I mean, this is not, is not complete. This is just to give an idea. There are timelines for some of these things that I said. We've passed some of those timelines. I have not heard any statement definitively or pronouncement by the President on poverty eradication. And time is going, Mr. President. You need to, it is said you have hit the ground running. A declaration of war on poverty, you have not done that. So time is ticking, Mr. President. You need to do that. All the governors, I'm speaking to you, time is ticking. You need to declare war on poverty in Nigeria. Otherwise, we're not going anywhere. Welcome back. What is the value of education? As I round up, these are just my concluding thoughts to refresh our minds on what this whole presentation has been about. What is the value of education? I came across this quote by Nelson Mandela, the revered Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa, who said, "Destroying any nation does not require the use of atomic bombs or the use of long-range missiles. It only requires lowering the quality of education." He says, "Patients die at the hands of doctors who are produced in educational systems as such. Buildings collapse at the hands of such engineers. Money is lost in the hands of economists and accountants that are produced in an educational system where the standards are, greatly devalued or lowered. Humanity dies at the hands of such religious scholars. Justice is lost at the hands of such judges. The collapse of education is the collapse of a nation." Nelson Mandela. I think this aptly captures the current realities in Nigeria. Now, when we talked about, the collapse of education, there's a strand, that runs through this quote that is not so obvious to the undiscerning. Nigeria does not lack men and women who are superbly educated, who are highly intelligent, So it is not a lack of education. We're speaking about education of the citizens of a nation guarantees that these have been thoroughly indoctrinated into a shared national vision and aspiration, a governing ethos and value system, a common destiny of their place and role in the global community of humanity. Whenever I encounter an American, child or youth, maybe 10 years or 12 years, it's so clear. They say to you very clearly that they believe America is the greatest country in the world, that the preeminent position of America in the world is non-negotiable. I'm talking about, children of American, society. They make it clear to you because they were indoctrinated from cradle, until adulthood that everything must be done to preserve and promote the preeminent position of America in the global arena. So every American child grows up with that national vision and aspiration. Also, a governing ethos and value system. What is our governing ethos and value system? We don't seem to have any. So everybody in Nigeria goes, their separate ways, doing whatever we want to do, and we're making a good job at trying to pull this country down. So we also need to have a common destiny, of our place and role in the global community of humanity. This is what we mean by, having destroyed our educational system. If we return civic studies, social studies into our curricula in the primary and secondary school system, and then we teach our children to have to understand, to know and understand what is our value system, what are our national ethos, and then to believe, in a shared destiny for all Nigerians, regardless of tribe, tongue, ethnicity, or religion. That is what we've lost, and that is what we need to return to. Now, in a nutshell, these citizens have become, if we have this, you have citizens who have become patriots and will defend their country even with their lives if need be. This slide becomes important because whenever agents of government or personnel of government tell you that we need to ramp up the price of crude oil because in Africa we are the highest, we pay the lowest. You should also ask them or put it back to them that what is our minimum wage? Our minimum wage does not even feature here. And speaking about the previous slide on minimum wage, the reason why you need to pay people living wages is because, of course, they pay more taxes, and of course, they can spend. Their disposable income is increased, and they can spend. The economy, is reflated. Economic activity, continues apace. This slide talks about Egypt as a role model. In the first part, I talked about China. How China eradicated poverty, moving 850 million of its citizens out of poverty, in 40 years. And removing that's amounting to about 75% of global poverty at the time. And of course, somebody may say, why using China? Why not an African peer. So this is Egypt. Now, this is interesting because look at this stats. In 7 years, from 2014 to 2021, Egypt built 10,000 new factories. That's the point. Egypt built, as a government, they built 10,000 factories. Why? To meet local self-sufficiency, to address gaps in their local economy. Any economy that is wholly dependent on foreign imports is an economy that is not going to grow and is going to crash. Because what you are doing, you are exporting jobs, you are exporting prosperity, you are exporting, human development to other economies. And that's what we've done in Nigeria for decades, and that has got to stop. So Egypt built 10,000 new factories in 7 years, from 2014 to 2021. What is the consequence of that immediately? The industrial sector's value increased from 22 billion in 2014 to 60 billion. So you could see an almost 300% increase in the industrial sector's contribution to overall Egyptian GDP. Now, Egypt's export rose from 20 billion in 2014 to 45 billion in 2021, also as a result of this single action. Export revenues rose from 20 billion, more than 100% to 45 billion. Egypt's President Mohamed Al-Sisi, commissioned 67,000 housing units in new cities east of Cairo at a cost of 1 billion in 2021. The Egyptian government built 1 million units of housing units in 4 years at a cost of 15 billion and is working at doubling this. Now, all of this, which is just a brief of the entire activities of Egyptian government, what has it led to in the overall position of Egypt on the GDP in Africa? Egypt's GDP grew from 235 billion in 2017 to 476 billion in 2022, overtaking South Africa and about to surpass Nigeria as Africa's largest economy. This is what a focused, determined, and patriotic leadership can accomplish. So when I say all of what I've said, I am not just speaking, from the air. I'm speaking from facts, empirical data. This is an African country. This is an African country doing exactly what I am saying our leaders at the different tiers of government, federal, state, local government, should be doing. Because if we sit, like I say over and over, governance is serious business, and it is meant solely for serious-minded people. The way we carry on in this country as a people in government, leaves so much to be desired. The work of governance is serious. Look at this. Building factories, building entirely new cities. We're not talking about building flyovers and roads and gathering an entire, state to commission and gather TV cameras and all of that. That's child's play. That's funny. China did it. Egypt is doing it. The templates for reconstructing and rebuilding Nigeria is all over the place. Are we ready to do the right thing? Are we ready to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work and put aside all the showmanship and all the razzmatazz that we call governance and get down to serious business and build this country? Are we ready to do that? Egypt is doing it. Like I said here, Egypt has overtaken South Africa as the second largest economy in Africa already. And Egypt is breathing down the neck of Nigeria. Before the end of 2023, I bet you Egypt will overtake Nigeria if we don't get our acts together. Here's a slide that is very interesting. In the first part, I'd mentioned why we need to deal with population explosion. I said we should in the master plan there should be a legislation, that limits population birth rates, to 2, per family for the next 10 years, 2024 to 2033. And the reason is simple. Our economy is sluggish. It's not growing. But our population is growing exponentially. So we're giving birth to children who are only getting sucked into the poverty, vortex. What is the poverty vortex? This is a graphical, diagrammatical representation of what a poverty vortex looks like. So this is people living in multidimensional poverty, and these are all the implications of this. So you have cyber crimes, inter and intra-communal crisis, kidnappings, banditry, terrorism, armed robberies. Because these children they've got energy, and they've got to find something or somewhere or someplace to dissipate this latent energy they've gotten. So if you can't provide education for them, if you can't give them skills, if you can't give them even sports access to dissipate their energies and grow this economy, because the role and responsibility of any serious government, any responsible government, is to channel the energies, the resources of your people to productive use, to growing your economy. So if you don't do this, you're going to have, this crisis. Now, let's leave this for a moment and come here. Now, we have a challenge with multidimensional poverty on education, on housing, on healthcare, on jobs, on skills acquisition, and all of that. But guess what we're doing? The National Assembly just got a total of 110 billion, as palliative. And 70 billion is earmarked to support the working condition of lawmakers. Now, guess what? 40 billion is for the acquisition of 465 SUVs, and also part of that will be bulletproof cars for principal officers and members. May I ask us, now, this amount of money could actually build 14,160 new classrooms and 3,600 primary healthcare centers. This colossal sum of money that we intend to spend, on just the entire less than 500 members of the National Assembly could do this, And when we do this, we reduce this. But then we choose not to do this by spending it on mere frivolities and waste. And so I use this medium to appeal to our leaders once again. We don't need to buy these cars. Some of you have been governors, some of you have been this and that, so you have all these cars. Can we use this money, where this money is actually needed? Build primary schools, build primary healthcare centers. I just showed you a clip of a man on TV just this week, who said in his entire local government, there is no primary healthcare center, there are no banks, and of course, there could be no roads and all of that. So let's use Nigeria's money. Let's do what Egypt is doing. Build cities, build homes, build jobs, build skills acquisition centers for Nigerians so that we can set ourselves free. Because we keep going to, where our leaders are always going to be buying bulletproof vehicles for as long as you don't take care of, the multidimensionally poor amongst us. Why do we have to eradicate multidimensional poverty? I'm rounding up now. Why do we have to eradicate multidimensional poverty? The president, like I said, had set up this ministry, rechristening the former Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management to Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation. I beg to differ with you, Mr. President. Poverty, multidimensional poverty, does not need to be alleviated. It needs to be eradicated. Poverty in Nigeria is a cancer that is eating this country up. It needs to be eradicated the same way physicians attack cancer in the body of a human being. Why do we need to eradicate poverty? Investors seek for safe havens for their investments. Rampant insecurity is a disincentive to local and foreign investors in any economy. Number two, multinationals either shut down or reduce their exposures in such a country. Foreign direct investments will gradually dry up. No amount of branding or diplomatic shuttles can change the narrative of an unsafe and insecure business environment. The cost of doing business continues to grow because of the numerous distortions and disruptions in the business environment occasioned by insecurity. Acute shortage of skilled manpower due to increased migration to safer climes. Nigerians are emigrating in their thousands on an annual basis because of insecurity. That's why we need to address mass poverty, because it is the root cause of insecurity ravaging and eating up our society. Transfer of specialized skills and knowledge becomes more difficult because no expert would be willing to come to an environment that is insecure because of that. Huge financial resources is channeled to combating insecurities rather than economic and human development activities. We've spent trillions, tens of trillions in the last decade fighting insecurity since Boko Haram came onto the national scene. And yet insecurity has grown worse because we're dealing with the symptoms. We're not dealing with the root cause. The symptoms are the various, facets of insecurity, but the root cause is multi-dimensional poverty. And we can keep throwing these billions and trillions at it, and we're not going to go anywhere. Let me be bold to say, even if we bring 1 million Navy SEALs to Nigeria, they would fail flatly because the root cause of insecurity is not attended to. Until we do that, we'll keep wasting money, chasing shadows. Another point, the national economy continues to hemorrhage resources and stagnate. Another point, the living condition of most Nigerians remains grueling and difficult. And finally, rate of crimes and lawlessness continues to increase until anarchy dawns. And I want to say, like most Nigerians will say, God forbid. But look at this image. Poverty is the parent of crime and eventually revolution. If you don't deal with mass poverty, we already have crime taking over the entirety of Nigeria. If we're not careful and do the right thing and change our paradigm of governance, we may have a revolution on our hands. I hope and I pray that will not be our lot. Let's do the right thing. Now, that's the end of this presentation on jobs creation and poverty eradication. And this ends the first part of the 3 strategic issues I highlighted when I started. The 3 are our crude oil and gas resource management. The second is multidimensional poverty. And the third is energy availability and sufficiency. With the part 1 and part 2, which concluded now, I have ended my presentation on multidimensional poverty. We need to create jobs, and eradicate poverty in Nigeria. In the next episode, God willing next week, I'll deal with how we need to manage our crude oil and gas resources for better efficiency and development of our nation. Thank you for joining me. And that's the end of the program today. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can watch this particular video and others that are there. You can follow me on all my different social media handles. Drop me a comment. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you next time. I believe in a new Nigeria, and it is possible. Bye.